From the moment we landed in Punk Hazard and were introduced to Smiles and Kaido, we've been anticipating one arc and one arc alone: Wano. Wano was not only the largest arc in One Piece, but it also served as the culmination of the entire Yonko saga. With the conclusion of Wano almost here in the anime, and with the manga already on to the next arc, I've kind of been wondering this one question: was Wano worth the hype? Join me today as I give you the answer. Wano, for everything that was promised, can be best described as a roller coaster, honestly. Wano had some of the most peak moments in One Piece just straight up, but it also had a lot of boring moments too. The whole first part was low-key not hard. Like, let's just be honest. We saw a lot of the Straw Hats who weren't in the previous arc of Whole Cake just kind of living it up and camouflaging among the citizens. Like, Usopp was scamming niggas, Sanji was selling food, and Zoro was finna get killed in Seppuku. Real quick on the Zoro stuff, I know this isn't correct, but I just love it how in my memory of the scene, the first time we see Zoro, this thing was about to kill himself, and then suddenly he's like, nah, fuck this, and just kills everyone there. No explanation, nothing. Honestly, that's, in my memory, that's how the scene went. Like, I don't really care what the nigga did before, that's how it is in my memory. No explanation or anything. That moved me, I cannot lie. But just honestly looking at Wano in general, a lot of this shit felt like filler, but I'm not going to keep trashing on Wano because honestly, Wano wasn't all bad. Wano had a lot of crazy peak moments. We had Luffy using Red Hawken, which is always great to see. We had Kaido making his official appearance, you know, kind of pulling up to the Straw Hats and everything. Luffy getting one shot by Kaido. Luffy learning Ryo. Us getting the true origin of Momo and his father Odin. Even just looking at Odin's backstory, we got to see Roger and Whitebeard for the first time, like officially. Obviously we had seen them before and shit, but we got their backstory, damn near. Like, we got an entire flashback arc of Roger and Whitebeard. Like, you can't complain about that. That shit was peak. Even touching on hockey specifically, we learned a lot more about the power system. In Whole Cake Island, we learned that there was an advanced version of hockey, specifically how there's an advanced version of observation hockey, which is Future Sight. But in Wano, Luffy learns about Ryo, and we find out that it's been used multiple times in the series already. And then much later, we learn about Advanced Conquerors. But for the most part, watching the early parts of Wano, I was on autopilot. Like, that shit was cute, but it was not worth all the hype that was built up from the entire post-time skip. But then, we get to the rooftop. That is when shit gets real, I'm gonna be honest. Chapter 1000 specifically was fire. It was a community-wide event that everyone was involved in. We got the story about how the people would come to save Wano, 22 or so years ago and things like that. And honestly, just the whole atmosphere of Chapter 1000, like, you kind of just had to be there to experience it. It was an experience like no other. Like, everyone was involved. It was great. With Chapter 1000, that shit was especially fire. We have the story about how these people are going to come save Wano, and then Luffy comes up on Demon Time with probably a top 10 One Piece scene ever. Luffy pulls up in front of two Yonko, walks right past them niggas, hits Kaido in his shit, and just tells them both, like, I'm gonna be the Pirate King. And the chapter ends, 3-week break. Like, that shit is insane. I remember when the chapter dropped, bro. It was like a 2 to 3 week break, and that shit was insanely hype. I'm not gonna lie, bro. That chapter, that rooftop scene, had niggas thinking that this was Oda's finest work ever. And I'm niggas. I gotta be honest. I was like, yo, this might be the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And even with that, along with that peak, it brought crazy agendas. Like, I remember just off that scene alone of Luffy hitting Kaido, people in the One Piece community were saying, like, yo, this nigga Luffy is slapping admirals, he's slapping Fujitora, he's slapping Kizaru. That scene had niggas thinking Luffy was way harder than he was. For that time in the rooftop, we witnessed peak. Every chapter was top tier, and in my opinion, it captured everything that made One Piece great. You had amazing action, you had character moments, you had lore, you had world building, and even the funny moments. Like, I feel like sometimes with One Piece, pre-Gear 5 obviously, because Gear 5 has enough funny moments. After the time skip, a lot of times people think that One Piece kind of lost some of its childhood allure or childlike allure. Like, it's no longer as goofy and the series tone isn't as, happy and go lucky as it used to be. But I feel like Oda was able to capture a lot of that, that innocence that One Piece used to have, even in the rooftop. Like, there was a scene that Luffy, Law, and Kid were basically talking shit at the beginning of the battle, and they were kind of like, yo, you're a chump, blah, blah, blah. And it was a really goofy, wacky scene at the very beginning. And I really enjoyed that because it was nice to see that even though the stakes were so high, and when I say so high, I'm talking about 2 fucking Yonko. Like, the stakes were so insane, we still could enjoy the characters being themselves. So that was Chapter 1000. That shit was all time. Like, I feel like if Wano was able to hit those peaks and stay there, it would have been the best arc ever, no contest. But you know, it was a little bit of fluctuation. But that first like 10 chapters, like I said, it was just peak. Another all-time chapter in Wano was chapter 1010. That shit was insane. Luffy reached a new class of fighter and awakened advanced conqueror's haki. Honestly, I don't love how the anime did it, because I feel like the way the anime did it with all the colors and shit, it was a little confusing. But in the manga, we were really able to kind of see like this whole advanced conquerors. It was a lot more clear with the lightning and stuff. It's like the way that Oda described it was perfect, honestly, because it was like Luffy hit a crazy epiphany. Like the world just made more sense to Luffy now. And then we had Zoro becoming the second nigga ever to scar Kaido, like ever. That's an easy 10 out of 10. Like, I have nothing to say about that chapter. Just honestly looking at, like I said, this arc and Kaido specifically had a huge focus on not just haki specifically, but conqueror's haki. It was kind of put, I think Kaido even said it at a point during the arc. He was like, yo, if you don't have that shit, don't even pull up to the pros. Like, that's the kind of level we're on. If you're not a haki user, if you're not a conqueror haki god, you're not going to win these battles. So we kind of got to see how the top tiers fight. And I feel like from pre-Wano fights and post-Wano fights, it's kind of been a difference. Like a lot more of a haki focus. Just talking about the rooftop again, the fight between the rooftop supernovas, who I've always thought were the coolest ones, which were Luffy, Law, Kid, Zoro, and Killer. Those five supernova I've always thought were the best and the coolest supernova. So to see those two niggas fight, the two Yonko, it was honestly just generational. But unfortunately, there were other moments in Wano, and in my opinion, that's when shit starts to slow down. We got these other side plots and these other fights that just weren't as hype. So one thing that One Piece loves to do, obviously you guys have seen, you guys are One Piece fans, is sometimes in these giant arcs like Water 7 or I'm not gonna say Marineford, but like Water 7 or like Thriller Bark, I'm gonna say, every Straw Hat gets a fight for the most part. And while in concept that shit is super cool, like we get to see every Straw Hat, usually they go up a level, they get a new ability or something like that. It seems super cool in concept, but it usually is never as interesting as we want it to be. Just involving that, like you have like the Sanji Black Maria stuff, that was the stuff for a second. Frankie had his battle, like there were just all these little fights that I feel like were cool, but they just weren't as hard. They just weren't as cool as I wanted them to be. Like they didn't really pique my interest for long enough. I do think the Zoro King fight was really hard though, I can't lie. That was a good fight. And even like the Sanji Queen fight was cool. We got to see more about Sanji's backstory and things like that. Or we got to see Sanji basically become a mutant or a cyborg. That was cool. But when you compare it to the hype or the peak that was the rooftop, you can see the fall off. Not to mention stuff like whatever Nami and Usopp were doing and Chopper. Like that stuff wasn't as cool. I'm just going to be honest. They threw in, you know, subplots like kind of speaking about Chopper. Like Chopper had the whole subplot of trying to heal the Wano niggas, which I know is important because that's Chopper's goal. He has to heal these niggas, but I don't care. The shit wasn't hard. You know, Nami and Usopp were just doing random shit. And then even the Momo subplot, like I understand the idea, like the whole Momo subplot was he has to become this leader worthy enough to rule Wano, but I just didn't care enough. I'm sorry. And I think that's a big point with the Wano stuff. A lot of the ideas were really, really cool. And I think, I don't know if I'm not going to say Oda was rushed, but I think if given enough time and, you know, thought process and, you know, plot and stuff, it would have been really cool. But what we got on paper just wasn't as hard with that stuff. Like the Momo stuff, I didn't really care too much. Like Yamato, like she was cool, but even among the people that I thought would be a Straw Hat, I thought she was the most deserving candidate. But I was just like, at the end of the day, she was a character that even she didn't even move me that much. So overall, just Wano had a lot of great moments, a lot of great points that could have made it an all-time arc. I think Wano was built up to be the greatest arc of all time. I think that was Oda's plan. Like up until, you know, when you get to the final arc and stuff, but I think that was a plan. But it's unfortunate because I think a big problem with it is that we spent too much time on things that weren't as interesting. Like I think the Chopper subplot would have been cool if you flush it out a little bit and maybe spend less time on it. You know, some of those things we could spend less time on. For instance, the Black Maria Robin fight, it was cool. The idea of it was cool, but why didn't Robin bust out like hockey and stuff? And Pete, maybe you disagree with me on those things, but I just think that a lot of the subplots that we spent way too much time on. And because of that, despite Wano's hype of being like a top one, like what it was supposed to be, which is this top one arc of all time, a lot of people view Wano as a top 5 to 6 One Piece arc. And that's not bad. Like One Piece is a great series. So if you're a top 5 to 6 arc in One Piece, that's not a problem. But it honestly speaks to how random subplots, forcibly expanded, and some lackluster conclusions can change how a series or an arc is perceived. So that was really interesting to me. But a series that was hyped by Oda since damn near the time skip by not only him but also fans, because niggas were, I ain't gonna lie, y'all niggas were hyping it too. I'm involved obviously, but y'all niggas were hyping it. Loki didn't live up to the hype, I gotta be honest. But that's okay, you know what I'm saying? Wano's still a great arc. Wano's still one of my favorite arcs, honestly, in One Piece history. It brought so many great moments. But yeah, it was cool. Shout out, we even got to see a little bit of Shanks. Like, every time we get a Shanks appearance, that makes the arc better. So that was cool. A lot of cool stuff happened in Wano. I can't really complain too much. But I guess asking the question of, was Wano worth the hype? It wasn't. But a lot of people gotta understand that overhype does not mean bad. So let me know, in your opinion, do you think Wano is worth the hype? Because I think that's an interesting question that I don't think a lot of people have kind of had yet. We kind of jumped from Wano right to the Egghead arc, and obviously I like Egghead. It's been cool so far, but we didn't really get a time to kind of decompress and look at the past arc we just passed, especially because Wano is a super arc. Like, it was an arc that, like I said, has been kind of the seeds of this arc have been planted, forever. So let me know what you guys think about Wano overall. Do you think it met the hype, or was it under? Like, let me know what you guys think. Was it overrated, underrated? Let me know what you guys think down below. Obviously, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification for more content. We got more stuff on the way. I'm on that weekly upload grind, so yeah, I'm out. So peace.